deal. In a world that might say one vote doesn't matter, it does matter. Because each person is an infinite worth and value to God. Your vote is a declaration of importance as a person, as a citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to get to the polls. Christians definitely need to represent in this way. At the very least. I would say this is the very least they need to do. All right, I know I'm up against it, but I wanted to make this real quick comment. How many of you guys heard about or saw that catcall video? There was a catcall video. It just went viral all over the United States. There was this woman, and she filmed herself for 10 hours in New York City, walking through the streets of New York City in what I would consider to be, fairly attractive attire. She's got some GoPro camera up there filming the whole thing. And what do you know? Gentlemen are observing the great beauty of the female specimen that was walking the streets. Well, this woman made this seem like this was the worst thing ever. These guys were screaming, and there was one guy that was real inappropriate. He walked beside her silently for 5 minutes. Yeah, that's a little creepy. I don't condone that. But for the most part, it was like, you're a pretty nice looking woman, so on and so forth. You can imagine. So this video came out, hit the mainstream water cooler type America this week, and it was all people were talking about. And my fellow dear citizens who disagree with me on the left were like, this is such a representative of how horrible our country is, how we don't respect women, et cetera, et cetera. I want to juxtapose that. I'm sure you've heard about that, and if you haven't, go ahead and subject yourself to that. I want to juxtapose that with somebody else I read about this week, which was a female Kurdish fighter. These are Kurdish women about my age and younger than me that are fighting ISIS over there with their own bodies. Now, I can't even imagine what kind of threat these guys face, because if a female fighter gets captured by ISIS, the level of horrific things that come her way are more than I could ever hope to articulate to you. But this Kurdish girl has already killed 100 ISIS fighters in protection of her village and her people. This woman, I would like to hear about what she thinks about the state of modern femininity. I think this lady actually should be the spokesperson, not some woman walking all through the streets of New York City, filming it and boo-hoo. People think you're attractive. No. This is Western, first world, comfortable feminism. And now I juxtapose that with the Kurdish fighter who's actually putting her life on the line and fighting the real war on women. The real, actual war on women. That moved me so much I wanted to bring it to your attention. The radio legend Gary is cracking the whip, and I must obey. He's cracking the Raiders of the Lost Ark whip at me. So, Perry ProTech Hotline, 419-529-1400, BrockLawleyMusic.com, WMAN, FM.com. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Control of the U.S. Senate up for grabs this Tuesday, with Republicans needing to gain 6 seats to do it. Democrats, however, are not conceding anything.
With more people getting jobs, Democratic Senator Ben Cardin.
We're feeling good about Tuesday.
But former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney says the rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer under President Obama.
This is really the last chance for America to pass judgment on the Obama administration.
Both men on Fox News Sunday.
Fox Radio's Jill Nato. Investigators continue to look into Friday's explosion of a Virgin Galactic spaceship that exploded during a test flight, killing one pilot and injuring another.
We intend to find out what caused this accident and make recommendations to prevent it from happening again.
Christopher Hart of the NTSB says they'll review sensor readings, video evidence, and debris spread over 5 miles of California's Mojave Desert. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Brock Lawley Show.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Brock Lawley Show. My name is Brock Lawley. Thank you for joining me. We're going to do a palate cleaner because you can't just hammer politics the whole time. That is not good. So we're going to step back. I've promised every single Sunday to do a segment that isn't just mired and beat down with politics. And last week, I talked about cohabitation. I talked about living with somebody before you're married. I know that is all the rave. That is the popular sentiment today. I part company with that. And for years and years, I've been thinking about what's in it for the lady. All I see is negatives for the lady. As a guy myself, I suppose if I didn't have the morals I do, I could see what's in it for me. I could see what's in it for the guy. But for the girl, I don't see what's in it. And I strongly, as passionately as I could, stuck my head out and said, hey, I don't think this is such a great idea. A wonderful friend of mine, Teresa Davis, really liked that. Teresa is a family counselor, one of the wisest women I know, but she's more importantly, she's in this professional wheelhouse. She mends families and helps people through traumatic times in their life. And Teresa, I want to welcome you to the Brock Lawley Show. Thank you for calling me up.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it, Brock.
Yeah, so Teresa, you said some interesting things to me, even by way of professional stats and some things you've just learned along the way as you were in the trend. Can you recap what you had told me? Maybe that'd be a great way to start.
Well, sure, Brock. Some of the things that I talked about, and then maybe you can even prompt me and let me know some of the things that you were thinking about. But first of all, I'm just teaching a lot of young women. I have found that cohabitation is becoming more and more common. And what I have tried to do in talking with young women is to let them know that their ideas about what cohabitation does is really the opposite of what they think it is. We actually have a name for it. It's called the cohabitation effect. And that is that every published study actually proves that people who cohabit to test a marriage actually have a greater risk for a poorer marriage. So it's the opposite of what people think. It's really kind of a mystery. One of the other things that I have learned just by experience and then also study is that women ought to be very careful about who they choose to cohabitate with. Because women tend to do more poorly. Men, cohabitation and men, it's associated with men's lower commitment to the relationship. And so once they've kind of slid into this cohabitation relationship, if they decide to marry, later on a man might say something like, I never really committed to you anyway. We just kind of moved into this. And so whenever conflict happens, they just aren't there for the long haul. They don't work through the conflict.
It seems to be so commonsensical to me, but if you look at society, it does seem that we've completely rejected that. And I wanted to ask you this. So as a guy, I remember being a single guy. My apartment was a pigsty. My life was a disarray. I could see how it benefits the young man to all of a sudden the dishes are done. Even if she didn't intend on doing that, women just don't want to live in an environment that's completely crazy. So you got that, and then obviously all the physical benefits. So it seems to me, I said this last week, it seems to me like you're laying your ace cards down, even if you forget the religious arguments. It seems to me like, even if you decide later that you want to be with the man, now your checking accounts intertwined, your rent's intertwined, your utilities. I mean, it just seems like it's all bad for the female. One last thing, if it doesn't work out, it seems like on the front end, the emotional ramifications and the fallout seem to hit the female so much sooner than the male. It kind of seems like bad decisions by way of relationships hit men much later in life, and it's the women that sort of take the emotional brunt of that. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that it's true, and women have a tendency to maybe their reputation sometimes are harmed a little bit more than a man's reputation is. A man can be considered just making a poor decision, but a woman is given some other titles whenever that she has a lot of relationships like that. It is a very difficult thing to leave a relationship, as you say, that is very tangled up with like you say, you talk about money and the places where they live, and even people that they're involved with.
Right.
It kind of puts them on a trajectory to continue with the relationship, even though there might be very, very clear signs that it's just not going to work. It would just be too hard to end it, and so they continue. And it happens too often. I think you are right that women tend to suffer a little bit more in that regard than men do.
How did this become so popular then? Because it doesn't seem like we're reinventing the wheel with this thought. It appears to me that this would jump out at the average person, but yet it doesn't. And you see more and more women, especially in the age of feminism that's supposed to empower women, I see this doing just the opposite. And yet most of the time when you hear about this, you hear it positively spoken of.
I don't have any research behind this, but this is my thinking. It's kind of a downward spiral. When I listen to young women talk about marriage, they're very frightened because of the high divorce rate. So one of the reasons that they give for cohabitation is that I'm going to make sure this is going to work.
Right.
I'm not going to get married because it's such a messy thing. Maybe their parents are divorced and they have experienced that, and they're going to do everything they can to avoid that. Unfortunately, cohabitation is not the way to go. Here's the way to go for young women. They are to spend time making sure that their values are compatible. When you're living together, you don't even concern yourself so much about values. But if you are dating, then you make sure that our values, it's kind of like there's an ambiguity that builds in cohabitation that does not work well for relationships.
Right. So
I'm going to find out, what is your goal for the relationship from a guy? If I'm living with him, I'm probably not going to ask him that so much as I am if I'm thinking about a relationship with him, a permanent relationship. What is your goal? What are your values? And I'm going to find out if there's a good fit for me. And that's something that doesn't generally happen if we're living together because we're in the throes of everyday life. So we're not going to do that. That's one of the things I would tell women to do, to spend time on relationship. Teach, as older people, which I am one of those, teach young people about healthy relationships. That's the best thing that we can do. And that's what I'm speaking out about, is teaching young people about healthy relationships, so that they have something else to go on to help them decide whether it is a good relationship. I'm hoping that makes some sense.
Teresa, that was so fantastic. And for those of you listening, I know you'll experience exactly what I experienced. Teresa is one of the wisest people. She's a she's a professor. She's a counselor. She has all the worldly resume checks, but what importantly strikes me as wonderful about her is she has the real life battle scars, and she is just a wonderful person. Teresa, thank you for joining me, and I'd like to have you on again. So I really, really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you, Brock.
Bye, Teresa.
Bye-bye.
So there you go. I totally agree. And, I wanted to give a little more gravitas to what I'm saying, because here I am, a young buck, I'm a guy. I can't really speak on these matters without getting laughed out of the room in 2014. But Teresa was brave enough to venture into this talk radio world where I know you can get bloodied and bruised, but she did so wonderful. I knew she would. And I'm going to have her on again because I want to talk about this stuff. I think so much of our life is in the relationships with other people, and so little conversation, so little thought goes into that. And one more caveat I would put on that. Girls, I've said this for the longest time, and next week I'm going to tackle guys. So don't think I'm beating up on you. But one of the things I think you should do is look at guys can play a really, really good game on the front end. Think of it as a golf, but it's the back end that gets them, that you fall to pieces. But I would say find out what kind of friends this guy has in his life. If you want to hint about what we're dealing with, as I suppose an alternative to cohabitation, reading the tea leaves, finding out whether it's going to fit. What kind of friends are influencing this man's life? Because let me assure you of this, there's one thing I've learned so far, is you are what you eat by way of your friends, specifically men. Because we're are these the kind of guys that are going to give him the high five for bad behavior? Or are these the kind of guys that are going to edify him, build him up, turn him into a man of character? I'll give you an example. At a very pivotal point in my life, I was a guy with my foot in a bunch of different worlds. I had a community of believers that, some people would call that like a youth group. And then I was an athlete, so I had the football players. And then later in my life, I had the Air Force guys and so on and so forth. I always had this foot in both worlds. And one of the things that saved me, I think, from making some really, really bad decisions and hurting people was the fact that I had a group of friends, a core group of friends, that when I went to them and I said, hey, this Friday I'm going to take this girl out. I'm going to do this and do that and do this. These friends would not say, oh, this is great, and celebrate with some sort of frosty beer toast. They would look me in the eyes and say, this is not good behavior. Why? Because it's not going to turn you into the man that you want to be, and I know the man you want to be because you've told me. There was accountability. I'm arguing that if you find a man and his friends are solid, 9 times out of 10 you're going to find a solid man. Moreover, ladies, here's a little helpful hint. If you're looking for a guy, let's say you meet a guy really, really impresses you. He's a nice guy, but he's not your taste. He's not your cup of tea. He's not really going to move the needle for you. Follow him back to his little beehive of friends, and there you're going to find an entire gaggle of what I would argue to be pretty good guys. Maybe one will turn into a hand of glove for you. I've said that to people before, and they're like, oh, isn't that mean? No, be upfront about it. Tell the guy. I'm a big fan of candor. I don't know how that'll go over, but I'm telling you, that's a nice little secret. Follow that nice guy back to his little beehive of nice guys, where you will find a smorgasbord of nice guys. Gary's cracking the whip again. Perry ProTech Hotline, 419-529-1400. We still got a little bit more time. We're going to cover some politics. Get ready for this election. Get your butt off the couch and vote. We'll be right back.
The Brock Lawley Show.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Brock Lawley Show. We're back. We're on the home stretch here. Let's tackle a couple more things. I was exposed to a Democratic campaign Get Out the Vote commercial. This is geared specifically to the youth. A little guy named Little John. Many of you probably don't know who he is. he gets all these kids. I'm turning out for this. I'm turning out for that. I'm turning out for this. I was struck by this because, of course, it was divide the constituency, divide and conquer. I hate that kind of politics. But what I decided to do is have a little fun with it. So I'm going to play a highlight reel of the Democratic propaganda piece that I would say, and then I'm going to show you Brock Lawley's version. I put in my own 2 cents.
I'm EJ, and I'm turning out for marriage equality.
And I'm turning out for reproductive rights.
I'm turning out for women's